I think, before we get to our first category, which is a most underrated fight, and we're going to give some examples in here, guys, so bear with us. Obviously, you guys might, out there, in YouTube land, have some fights that are worth mentioning. I'd say throw them in the comments, and, that might be an episode later.
Oh, absolutely, because there's no way we're going to mention everything that's everybody's favorite, and opinions or so. Yeah. Everybody's got one, right, guys? So
someone's going to throw one out there, and I'm like, oh, yeah, that was a great one,
Yeah. How could you not mention this in all this conversation?
Right.
So
I think like an honorable mention category, something that it's not your favorite, but it's definitely worth mentioning out there. You had one that you were...
Yeah, in the previous episode, if you guys watched it, I mentioned the Obi-Wan... Darth Vader fight from episode 3. He's Darth Vader at that point, even though he's not in the suit. Or the Hayden Christensen Ewan McGregor fight. That, to me, it's one of the most underrated just because of the hate that the prequels kind of have had over the years. But anyway, if you want to see the rest of my thoughts, I think I'll move on from that one.
Yeah.
Go back and listen to that. But do you have anything to add on to that fight?
Yeah, actually, what I was going to say about that, and then I was going to say, following fights are worth mentioning and not our picks for best, but the Obi-Wan and Anakin fight, Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. I remember one of those things while they were fighting, I just kept saying in my head, the line that, Obi-Wan had when he was talking to Yoda about this. It's like, I can't kill him. He's like my brother, and even if you have a brother or don't have a brother, that line should, really, just hit home for people, because it's like, think about it. Either, that's your best friend. It's almost like you are blood relatives with them, that you've been through the thick and thin with them. Whether, that even though there was a master Padawan, kind of relationship, it had gone beyond that at a certain point, and they had a mutual relationship, even though you're supposed to not have that as Jedi, which they all break that, whatever. They all have close personal ties and relationships of some sorts. But when they were fighting, is like what really kind of just kept hitting home is that thought. And on Obi-Wan's side, and then on Anakin's side, I just kept seeing, this jealousy, that something may have went on between Obi-Wan and Padme.
Yeah, I love that. I love that theory. I love that, and I wish it would have been more, not as subtle in the movie.
It was very subtle.
It was just that one thing. It was just he's holding that iPad in the apartment scene. If you remember when he's talking to Padme, and he can sense Obi-Wan has been there through the Force, and he says Obi-Wan's been here, hasn't he?
Right.
And there's this jealousy going on, and it's like when he steps off that ship, he's like, you brought him here to kill me. How, does his mind go back? How long has this been going on? How much you betrayed me too, and it's everything. There's lines that didn't make it in the movie that Palpatine was insinuating that Obi-Wan was having a relationship with a senator. He was being very coy and subtle, but he knew where Anakin's mind would go. Obviously didn't make the film, but would have been even more, in your face about this is really something that he perceived in his own mind and made up and became jealous and used it as a way to turn on Padme and get angry. And instead of trying to say, my mission is to save your life, he ends up force choking her. Yeah. And so it makes a little more sense. I'm not condoning the action, but I'm saying you can logically rationalize it at that point. You can understand the way he feels, and you're like, okay, if he thinks he was cheating on her and he's done all of these things, I just killed a bunch of children for me, and you've been boinking my master. If that's what he's thinking in his head, imagine the emotional chaos that would have to be. I mean, your mind would break at that point. Look at all the stuff I did for you, no matter how reprehensible it all was. But look at all this bad stuff I did for you, all for you to save your life, and you're having this thing on the side.
Right.
It would completely wreck it, and I wish that was played up a little bit more in the movie. I do think some hints were there, but
it was just so subtle. But you're almost as if without that, it almost just looks like,
which is the ultimate one. Was one of the most ultimate conflicts. We talk about fights and these other things besides just two lightsabers clashing. The fight over a woman. That's one of the most famous stories of all time. With Helena of Troy. And one of the oldest stories that we have, and so maybe so I mean, that's what we're talking about with Joseph Campbell and those stories resonating, fighting for the affections of a woman, and seeing how, and a woman could fight for the affections of a man too. I don't want to. It could be a vice versa situation, but in this case, I mean, it's a tale as old as time. It's about love and the things you'll do for love, even if they're horrible things. Like you, and I think that's the tragedy of not Darth Plagueis the wise, but Anakin Skywalker the unwise.
Right.
The least wise person in Star Wars, as iconic and great as Darth Vader is. He's a little naive and dim at times.
Well, yeah. But without that passion, like you said, without some of those components to it, it does kind of look like a kid that's just throwing a tantrum and gone overboard with that tantrum at times. And it's like, I think that's where, unfortunately, some people got that impression out there. Correct me if I'm wrong. It seemed like...
It's hard to imagine the perspective of having so much power inside of you that literally could combust, and you can move things with your mind, to have that kind of responsibility on you. I think it's hard for people to connect with that Hayden Christensen performance at times, even though I do think it was exactly what George Lucas wanted them to do.
Sure, yeah.
I don't think that Hayden didn't give the performance that was wanted. I think that George just wanted a performance that some fans didn't appreciate.
No, I know, and that's been the kind of curse of Star Wars at times, is that when George actually starts directing, you can write this stuff, but you sure can't say this stuff, So it's like we've kind of had that, and when you kind of do go back to episode 4, New Hope, when you hear some of the lines and you're just like, how the heck did they deliver those at that time? And this film still became the success it had. But the passion is there. One of the things you'd mentioned, and I've only seen this film once, is that Man on Fire.
Yeah,
I want to hear a little bit about that, because like I said, it's been a long time since I've seen that. And I've heard a lot of great things about the film. Well,
basically, I look at it, it's like a love story is the way I look at it. It's not a romantic love story, but it's the Dakota Fanning is in it when she's still a small child.
Yeah.
So, and when she was a child, guys, look at the list of actors she worked with. I mean, Tom Cruise, Denzel Washington. I'm just forgetting like tons more. I'm sure she was basically the kid in every movie for a while.
I Am Sam, that was another good one. But yeah, she's been in tons of Charlotte's Web as child actor, tons of stuff. Yeah.
But so she's in this movie. She gets there's a plot to kidnap her by the stepfather, and he's working with the cartel, the Mexican cartel, whatever they are. And
gangsters.
He's basically trying to get some of the ransom money and pull one over on the police. Anyway, Denzel Washington plays a character called Creasy, who is basically her bodyguard. He takes her to her swimming lessons and things like that. He's very distant from her in the beginning of the movie as their relationship grows, and just at the point that they are basically, it's a parent-child, relationship, basically, kind of at that point that they spend more time with each other than anybody else. At least that's the perception of the movie. And then she gets kidnapped. It seems to have gone wrong. He thinks she's dead. He gets very injured in the fight. Gets out of the hospital bed and basically is running on pure rage and starts blowing everybody up in his path. And it's basically an internal conflict. I've got to avenge this little girl for love. I've got to do it because these people deserve to die, and it shouldn't happen to anybody else. And I'm willing to literally blow people up to make sure it doesn't happen to anybody else. Because there is no justice in that world they're living in, and that version of Mexico in the movie for this. The cops aren't going to do anything. They're waiting for him. They're actually spying on him, waiting for him to take the cartel down as basically just this civilian. Yeah. And then it turns out she's not dead. Yeah. And then he ends up just passing away when he trades lives with her, kind of the soul for a soul thing. The guy says, well, you mess with a bunch of my people, I'll let her go free if we get you, and I can kill you. Yeah. And so he agrees to this, and he just ends up peacefully passing away in the car when he gives himself up. It's very emotional. They're playing very sad music, and it's actually the music, if I remember correctly, is being sang in Spanish. As an English-speaking person, the music is beautiful, but you don't understand the words, but you can still grasp the context of what the music means because of the notes and everything that are being played, and he passes away, and it's just his unbridled rage of, you took something from me. I didn't have anything for so long, except booze, and I finally get something in my life and it gets taken away from me, and this is the only way I know how to deal with it. It's just an interesting. Not everybody would react that way, but it's just the story of how one person might react. And to me, it's a fight against himself, against the pain that he's dying the whole movie from being shot, and he's just plowing through it.
And I think, some people might, throw some similarities out there with the Taken films. And I'd say already there's a huge difference. Denzel's character has essentially flipped his lid, and he's on the adrenaline. He hasn't compartmentalized that loss. In Taken, Liam Neeson's character, he's a professional at what he does. He is convinced that his daughter is alive somewhere, that he's going to save her. He never at any point, really does lose control.
No, he's a very stoic character just in general, because I think that's him as an actor. So.
And I think that's what makes his character interesting. What makes Denzel's character, and of course Denzel Washington, fantastic actor. About anything he's in, I think he just draws the eyes to him. He demands the attention. He demands you get into his character just by his presence and all that. And so seeing him just kind of unleash and stuff, that makes for a very cool character. And of course I think it's a very good kind of character that he plays in. Oh, gosh, I'm trying to think of some of the things where he's not even that way. I even think of sports movies. What was it? Where he was the coach of the football team in the
Titans.
Remember the Titans,
right.
And he's in control of his faculties and all of that during
that's the sign of a great actor, is being able to play a lot of different. I mean, it's called range. The term that they use in acting. But he's got and that's what I always said about when I was doing my Star Wars podcast. I'd always gloat on Adam Driver, like he as a young actor has so much. Just as a layman watching somebody on the screen and act, like he has so much range, even within a single character. Maybe not so much the Kylo Ren character as much, but if you watch his performance on the show Girls on HBO, his character is so weirdly layered. He can be like this crazy, unhinged kind of bang your head, like he just inflicting self-pain kind of guy, or he can be the smartest guy in the room and like give you intellectual, deep thought-provoking things to think about, and in either way it's believable for that character to be doing it. And so when you're able to even do that with one character and make them so multi-layered where it's like they're so off the wall, you don't know what they're going to do next. And I don't know if you've seen it, the show Ozark. There's an actor who plays an FBI agent. He reminds me of the acting style so much of the Adam Driver type. He's so layered and psychopathic, but so great, and you root for him, even though he is a completely horrible person. Even though he's fighting for the good side, he uses underhanded, I forget the actor's name, and I can't even remember the character's name, but that's a good new show on Netflix, and he's just that kind of acting that really appeals to me. And I know we're getting off subject again, so I don't know, do we want to go into the worst fights? Yeah, the most pathetic, terrible choices. There's out there fights that you're just like, why? Tell me, some of the, examples you thought of. I just remember being in Buffalo Wild Wings with a friend of mine, and he was saying how that he watched one of the Fast and the Furious movies on the plane ride over. He was going overseas for the military, and he was like, dude, he was hitting him with a pipe wrench, and it like wasn't even hurting him that much. He was like, just how it's like these aren't suit. If you see Iron Man get hit by an asteroid, okay, he's got an Iron Man suit on, and that's the universe that's been built. These guys are hitting each other with pipe wrenches like it's wrestling and getting back up. So like you've got to play within the rules of your universe. In Star Wars, you can make things fly in the air. In the Fast and the Furious, if somebody started doing that, we could be completely out of place. Right. So I mean, that kind of thing, and then also and I hate to pick on Vin Diesel here. The Chronicles of Riddick. I don't know if you ever saw the end scene. What an anticlimactic, just depressing. Where are you going with this? Like, he kind of wins in the end, but he doesn't even win the fight. He's going to lose. The other guy steps in, and then It's just kind of weird and
Yeah.
wasn't a good movie to begin with. But
No, you're right. I didn't see much from that was like, well, really.
it was several years ago, but I just remembered that as just like it's this.
Well, yeah.
The character, like Vin Diesel, like that character of Riddick is like you want to like it. He is charismatic in that character, I think.
Yeah.
And then the Pitch Black movie, if you ever remember that one.
I like Pitch Black a
And,
lot.
and so that's what it's the same character
Yeah.
that he's playing, and then they did another remake and it bombed and that character, the movies and the plots are not great. The character, like Vin, I think that was the character he was honestly kind of born to play more so than the Fast and Furious character. Like I like his character. But it just there isn't any good scripts to go around the character. It seems to be the problem. But anyway, that fight, one of the worst that pop into my head. Something that I would have liked to have been better actually, and it just the movie and the fight just wasn't any good. And
well, sure, and then you know what you're getting when you go into the Fast and Furious. You can kind of, and I'm sorry.
I mean, there is
fan.
a ridiculousness to it, and they do employ an actor that goes by the persona of Ludacris, and that's exactly. I just think of Rick Moranis now, Ludacris speed.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, and so one of the things that I didn't put in our notes, anyways, it's and believe it or not, I had to even look it up because I remember this fight because of how bad it was in high school. When you're learning Shakespeare and they show you some of the classic Shakespeare films, the old Romeo and Juliet, the old Hamlet, there was one on Macbeth, and if you know the story of Macbeth, he's been told that essentially you can't die by the hands of a man who's been born of a woman, and that's obviously every man, so he's basically indestructible, invincible. And then there was a man who claimed that, he claimed he was untimely ripped from the womb, so I'm guessing a C-section at that time, which probably meant his mother died, and he was in a very miraculous way born and lived, and so that's the man that's going to defeat him. And so it's on. Okay, there's going to be this fight between Macbeth and this other guy, and it's almost as if they handed these two actors swords and said, "Okay, go fight." And none of them were trained in choreography or sword fighting.
It's just like two kids out in the park swinging sticks at each other.
It's like ting 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 ting. Ow! Stop it! It's just like, oh, this is awful. I mean, I think at one point, like one had the other one's leg and they're hopping across, and all the other military, because it's ancient kind of times or medieval sort of times, and all the guys in armor are kind of watching this like, what in the heck are we viewing here? And it was just so awful, and I only remember that just because of that. The rest of the film, very forgettable, but that scene, that fight scene. So there's some bad choreography out there, and it already makes it, regardless of whether it's a good story or not. I just remember that. But yeah, there's some pathetic fights out there, and some fights that we've asked, did we ask for this fight? Did we, as fans of something, really need to see this? Some of them I can say are justifiable out there. We needed to see a fight between these two characters. We needed to see Civil War, and some ways actually we needed to see something different because it's always going to be that same formula. Let's see, if we start throwing a wrench in this and see what happens. And obviously it's, paid off for them. Think about now. Let's get into choreography. When you think of that, the moves and all of that go into choreography, and maybe put aside the fact that sometimes those A-list actors do have stuntmen come in and do the work for them. Some of them that stand out as the best. Or
if you're George Lucas, you just hire the stunt man to play the character, as he did with Ray Park and Darth Maul. He basically just said, "Well, why don't you just have the job?" I guess.
And it comes down to the fact that it's like, well, I don't know how good of an actor he is.
He's not really going to talk very much anyway.
Right.
So
I mean. And then we get the animated version of him that never shuts up, right?
Right.
But the actual actor that played that stuntman, that was my pick, actually. Best choreographed fight. I think that fight between Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, and Darth Maul.
It's the first time we get to see a lightsaber fight of what George Lucas said the golden age of the Jedi. He's like, in the original trilogy, we didn't have that. He's like, we had Darth Vader, and he's like broken down. We have Obi-Wan, and he's old and not, he's not the Jedi he once was. Luke's still a student fighting, his crippled father. He's like, so we never really got to see what the Jedi could really do. And in episode 1, of course, you get right off the bat, they're fighting droids, and you can see how acrobatic and things like that they are. Yeah. And then they fight, and they actually have the lightsaber fight. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and just I think you can add in everything else that makes it great. Obviously that score there and everything else. But just as far as the choreography, I'm not pretending like I know a whole bunch about how choreography is designed or what makes it good or who even the best choreographers out there in the movie business are today. It's just not something I particularly keep up with. Yeah. But and it may be something you're a little bit more akin to and can speak to with things like that and influences of maybe fights and things like that from other movies and how it's brought into that. So maybe that's a discussion for another day.
Sure.
But absolutely, yeah. I guess I can't really. I mean, I want to go back to like something like I don't know if I really have a pick for this, but just something like from The Matrix, just because it was something so different cinematography wise, and it was doing something new, and it's like bending the rules of. You could bend the rules of time and space on Earth because you weren't really on Earth. You were in a computer program, and you could manipulate the physics of this computer program, hack it basically.
Yeah, and the world opens up. At that point, what can a fight look like at that point when gravity's kind of taken out of the situation?
And again, play in your universe, and they set that up very well. That like, hey, we've got all these toys to play with in this universe, and we can do that. So, and that's the kind of thing, So then it's like, this is unbelievable, and we've never, you would never see like anything that happened in this in real life. At least we never have. But in this context of this world and the way it's been explained, it makes sense. So I would go to something just like one of the fights, and just because there is such a heavy influence of different martial arts and stuff as well. It's I know Kung Fu, and he knows all, and he goes from different forms. Of fighting within mid-fight. He's just changing. And he does that throughout the movie series, and he kind of shows off almost in a way once he becomes extremely powerful. Right. He's almost showing off in a way. But yeah, I would go to that just because of all the martial arts that was involved. And, and there's obviously... If they're probably going to go, well, what about a Bruce Lee movie or something like that? Well, go do that. I haven't seen one in such a long time that I couldn't really speak on it too much, into the, the shadow of the, I don't know what they all are. I'm sure somebody will say something like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. What about the Jackie Chan?
Jackie Chan, Jet Li, all those guys, fantastic, obviously, that they are, so well
maybe
trained.
Not in the genre of movie that we usually watch, I would say. But you've seen enough of their movies, and obviously they're talented at what they do.
Well, it's almost like sometimes those are the actors that, I'm sorry to say, when it comes to the range side of things, it's like I've hired Jackie Chan, and then he comes in and it's like, okay, who do you want me to fight? So that's kind of a given, and it's like, no, we're not going to use you for that. What do you mean you're not going to use me for fight scenes or Jet Li?
Well, and then in the way it kind of works, and I don't want to criticize Jack, but in like the Rush Hour movie, they use kind of like whether he's really like that or not, the perceived naiveness of what maybe a white American would think of this. Little Chinese guy jumping around fighting everybody. It's like, what did, back then, what did we think? Oh, yeah, well, he's just, we have preconceived notions where we just judge, and I'm not saying me or you, I'm just saying people in general.
Yeah.
We judge, and that's how actors, I'm talking about typecasting and things like that.
Yes.
Maybe Jackie Chan has more range than we realize. He's just never really been given as many opportunities to display that, but we kind of see a little bit of that in Rush Hour, and he's able to have that comedic force. But, how much of that was really just playing off of Chris Tucker, who's, a great comedian. So.
Right. I would say if you see the remake of The Karate Kid, actually,
I was thinking that, but I've never seen it, so I didn't want to talk about it.
That's a good one, actually. If you get the chance to see that one, there's a pretty good range, and you kind of get some surprising, range out of Jackie Chan. I wish we could see more of that, but you're right. But the same thing with Donnie Yen and, bringing him in Rogue One, right? That was Donnie Yen, So I actually enjoyed his performance in Rogue One.
Yeah, I thought he was a bright spot in that movie.
Got his excellent training as well as a magnificent performance, and then I think even his idea of saying, "Can you make my character blind?" Oh, so cool! That idea. How it opens it up. He can fight this well, and he's blind. Wow. So that kind of idea there. Choreography. There's some, obviously actors that go back to the Star Trek original series when you see blatantly a stuntman has taken the place of Captain Kirk because he's jumping off of something and he's going to tackle the bad guy, and you're like, wow.
That beats a rag doll.
Yeah, I know. So, but there's some really great stuntmen out there, and there's some really great actors who do their own stunts, and God bless them. They're good at what they do and all that. But obviously, the director is always like, "Are you okay? How about this? Maybe and this is going to maybe go into some other episodes, we've always said we wish we would have seen this fight, whether it's in the same franchise or maybe expanded from one franchise to another, maybe even sticking with within a franchise. What have we been lacking? What is there a fight that we always wanted to see but never got? And I'll say mine maybe while you're kind of stirring on that one. And I know this comes from me playing the Galaxy of Heroes game, too much on the phone because you've got the hollow characters of the Star Wars characters, and you can obviously pit them up in a team against another team. And obviously we have some of the characters in there that we like in Star Wars, so we built their character up. And Ahsoka Tano, we've got the Clone Wars version of her and the Rebels version of her, and both have their own kind of little differences and powers of what they can do. Not much difference, but and I can play Kylo Ren from either Last Jedi or Force Awakens, and I always kind of thought, wow, wouldn't that be kind of a cool fight between those two? Not that there's much connection, that you could. Why with these two?
Not really. What we've been talking about the whole episode about being the chemistry and all of that and the connection. Why you'd want to fight? There's none of that.
No good reason.
It's just
In my head, I'd like to see what would happen. I'd like to see who would wipe the floor with the other one, because when I think of the Rebels fight with Vader and Ahsoka, and that scene where you get his mask, chopped and all of that, and there was that moment between the two of them, and so there was the passion. We found it. We found the heart, and there it was. And it's a difficult fight for both of them for that reason. And so Kylo kind of in a sort of way being the new Darth Vader, but again, there is not that connection. It would be very much two strangers.
Yeah, it would just be a fantasy kind of matchup, which I think we'll probably do on another episode where we kind of just really do some crossover stuff and just debate who would win the fight. So hopefully we'll have some disagreements when we get to that episode. I hate to stay around Star Wars, but like Anakin versus Darth Maul, like if Darth Maul could have been, I guess he was alive, but when they were making the movies, he wasn't alive. But and if he would have been alive in the story, to our knowledge, or been involved in the story during the movie making, in episode 2 or 3, wouldn't that have been a neat one to see on screen? Like that kind of unbridled rage of Darth Maul, and then like Anakin kind of has that side of him too. Would he turn that on? And kind of the way Obi-Wan has had to kind of flirt with the dark side a little bit when he fights Maul, because he finds himself just a little bit kind of outmatched by the power of Maul. So he kind of has to, and I think a Clone Wars episode even mentions that the first time they fought, which was always a theory of mine, and Clone Wars confirmed it, that he did touch the dark side in that original fight that we mentioned earlier.
Phantom Menace,
in the Phantom Menace moment. So, like an Anakin Maul, I hate to just stay with Star Wars so much, but that one would obviously be a neat one. And then I'm trying to think of something like in the superhero realm of things, and it's hard not to like cross over, because we've seen kind of, we've seen Captain America and Iron Man fight. We've seen Iron Man and the Hulk fight. We've seen Thor kind of, we saw a little tangle with them in the first Avengers movie, like him and Iron Man, and they're all kind of, it's like a 3-way kind of battle royale moment. So we've seen like the Avengers and stuff fight. We've seen Batman and Superman. I don't know that there's really something like jumping out of my head. Maybe something with Spider-Man and one of these other characters. I'm trying to think of something modern that they could actually do in a movie that would lead down that path. But talk about acrobat. Black Panther versus Spider-Man. That would be. They would just be doing gymnastics around each other. So I'll go with that one.
It would just be
There's no reason for them to fight each other at this point. But unless they're both in the Soul Stone and they just want to get, and they're just like they're both cranking, get your leg off mine, and then they fight each other. And Thanos is looking at him laughing.
Well, the in the monster, shout out to my monster friends out there in the kaiju, giant monster verse. We are going to be getting eventually a remake of the King Kong versus Godzilla. So we, the fans during the 1960s, 1950s when Godzilla came out, 1930s when King Kong came out. Finally, they in the 1962, I want to say film, and I'm sorry, Godzilla fans, my dates in my head are all mixed up. But I think it was 62 film where they actually have King Kong and Godzilla go up against each other. It's a match made in heaven. That's great. Now, what we never have had is Godzilla fighting the other franchise in Japan. Daiei Films had the giant fire-breathing turtle Gamera, and that was kind of their version of Godzilla. So he's saving the children, and all this. He's the friend to all children and hero and things like that. So Godzilla fans and Gamera fans, we've all kind of gotten along, but we all kind of wanted that matchup to happen. But what's funny about the monster side of things, and we're talking about all these reasons what makes up a good fight, and I might have to justify what makes a good fight between two giant monsters. Usually it's territory. It's usually just you're muscling in on my
from an animal perspective, I mean, that is an important thing. We might not as I mean, I think on some level we can, because I mean there is some kind of instincts in us as humans where we are territorial, not to the extent of even your dog that lives in your house or your cat that lives in your house. They've got much more of a sense of their territory. Maybe your 15-year-old daughter or something, going to her room, knock before you come in. Maybe that kind of territorial thing we see. But generally, humans aren't that touchy with that. So maybe we don't really think of, well, why is this monster so mad? Why, we don't really comprehend it without really having to think about it, like you say, really take it a step further and want to find the reason why they're angry or why they need to fight each other.
Yeah, and what makes the monster films, why we keep coming back to that, is not necessarily the action. It's not necessarily because of who's going to dominate over territory. It's why they were brought together in a lot of ways. So that monster is under the control of these aliens, or this monster is actually a mechanical version of Godzilla, Mecha Godzilla. So the humans created him, or aliens created him for the reason of pitting him up against Godzilla. So, or someone else brought in this, and it's always funny when they brought another monster in to destroy the monster we were dealing with. And what happens when he defeats that monster? We're left with him, the victor. And now how do we deal with him? We bring back the other one back to life. And I'm not even kidding you. There's a film that happens, that they brought in, they went back in time to get rid of Godzilla, but then they brought another monster back from that time. Now that we have that monster, let's bring back Godzilla back to life. And he fights that monster. It's King Ghidorah, and we're going to get him in the next one. Godzilla defeats King Ghidorah. Now we got to deal with Godzilla. What do? We made a mechanical version of King Ghidorah to fight Godzilla, and in the end, we have to have a stalemate where they both destroy each other, which it doesn't happen. You can't keep a good monster down. He's going to come back. It's just like Jason Voorhees. He's always just going to keep coming back. You can't
just keep making the same movie and playing the same
exactly, yeah, or Freddy, or any of those slasher, Halloween, all of those, which I never really, got into those, but it's somewhat like that in the monster.
Wait a minute, did you say Jason Statham or Jason Voorhees?
Jason Statham? He's coming back too.
That's what I thought. I was thinking the bald-headed Jason. I don't know who you said.
Oh, I said Jason probably, but yeah, the Jason of the Friday the 13th
That's
movies.
Who you know. Yeah, because when you said Freddy, it clicked for me. So okay, first
the monsters. Yeah,
first funny goof up for the show.
Whatever.
Leave it
in. That's
in.
Okay. Yeah, it stays in there. Yeah, everyone can make fun of us in the comments.